Welcome, everyone, to another podcast. And we have got Leslie Robinson all the way from the UK from Open Audience. Now, Open Audience is an audience engagement consultancy using specialized technology to shape agendas and outcomes in meetings all over the world. And it's all about turning passive delegates into active participants. I love that. Welcome to the show, Leslie.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'll speak slowly as I'm Scottish.
No, we love the accents from that part of the world. And if people don't understand, they sort of embrace it and try and
Yeah,
figure it out. And
yeah. Well, it is funny. I mean, when you look at subtitling, AI-driven subtitling, it doesn't cope with Scottish very well. But that's an aside. That's an aside.
I love it. I love it. So Leslie, tell us a little bit about Open Audience and sort of a little bit about your background, really, how your experience around delivering events.
Yeah, no, well, thanks for having me. I do appreciate it. I guess I've got an eclectic background in a kind of different way of getting into events. Because my original career was in HR learning and development. And then after a couple of different companies, I joined a global pharmaceutical company and worked for about 26 years. And the great thing was I never did the same thing twice. And the challenge was I was never quite sure what I was good at, apart from never doing the same thing twice. And at one point in the journey, I ended up managing an events team where basically I had to reduce it from X number to Y number and contract out the service. Right. So my real involvement with events was reshaping an organization. But having said that, in the last maybe 5, 10 years in the organization I was in, I spent a lot of time on stage working with groups, working with audiences, sometimes managing it, sometimes being on stage. And for me, I spent a lot of my life in meetings where A, people didn't have English as a first language, but B, I spent a lot of time in really rubbish meetings where I'd go away thinking, well, that's 2 days of my life I'm not going to get back. And so I think that combined with the fact I got quite interested in how you engage staff and employees and what switches the light on and how do you measure the behavioral or cultural change of something you're doing and how do you deliver something that's of real value to a very diverse audience. So that kind of kicked it off. Now I got a bit bored after 26 years in one organisation, and I headed out on my own, not really sure what I was doing, apart from the fact I didn't want to do what I'd done before. And that kind of led a journey into the event side because I thought there must be something to this. Death to boring meetings. There must be something you can do that really makes a difference. And then I thought, well, who's going to buy me as some guy who's got some ideas? So I found some technology that linked to events and had a bit of a play. And the technology was somebody else's. It wasn't brilliant, but it made me realize what people actually wanted and customers wanted. And that started a journey, which is I developed my own tech, used other people, and kind of the rest is history, so to speak.
Yeah, great. And look, I think, I can feel for you on that one and relate is that, when I think when you work for a big corporation, I think you're either a person that would like to, you either stay in that for comfort or you
Yeah,
really want to start your own business. And half the time you don't really know. So you go out and start something and
yeah,
the first one might be a flop and
yeah.
it might be a success, right? And it's a
Yeah.
learning curve and,
Yeah. And to be honest, that's okay. And in the last 10 years, a lot of us spent in emerging markets. So I worked across 32 countries where literally I could decide on it, not quite on a whim. Do we go to Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, or Kazakhstan to invest and grow the business? And then luckily I came back to head office. And at one point, it's like, here's 3 forms for a stapler, and it's like, what is that all about? And so I went out thinking, whatever I build and whatever I shape, whatever I grow, I will never have 3 forms for a stapler. But that point is getting
Excellent.
that point is getting close because we're growing, and it's getting quite complex. But we
Oh,
will not. We might have 1 form for a stapler, but certainly not 3.
I love it. I love it. So tell us a little bit about the types of events that you're running over in the UK. I know you do some stuff overseas as well.
Yeah.
You have, from what you've discussed previously, is you've specialised in healthcare. You've got a lot of very, very large clients. So tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about some of the types of events that you run,
Right.
small or large.
Pre-COVID or post-COVID?
Pre-COVID, and then moving
All
into
right.
post-COVID, how you pivoted.
Yeah, because I think that's the whole what are events and what do events do has changed dramatically for us over the last couple of years. So pre-COVID, we had a quite a successful business model where we were the kind of secret source of engagement. So you'd work with client X, they would say, "I've got a 90-minute symposium in Bangkok," and off we'd trot to Bangkok for 90 minutes. Sprinkle our magic engagement dust on the meeting, probably involve the people before, probably involve the people afterwards, help the organization, the client, the agency have a more impactful 90 minutes and come back. And in the 12 months pre-COVID, we were on all 6 continents. We went to Shanghai and didn't even have an overnight in the hotel. We pulled an all-nighter and slept on the plane coming home. It was that kind of brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Not very environmentally friendly. But we were running stuff in China. We built tech that worked behind the Great Firewall of China, Melbourne, South America, North America 14 times, and lots of different countries. And then COVID hit. And within 2 weeks, all our business that we carefully crafted, shaped, and sought out just disappeared overnight. And it was a real kind of interesting point because it's always like, oh, okay, they would just shut up and go away because our business model has fallen apart, or do we actually think about, oh, what's the future look like? And I think what's quite interesting is like pre-COVID and now we're like 5 times the size organizationally, and I think in an early point it was kind of like, oh, people will have to have meetings somehow. How are they doing meetings anyway if they're not meeting face to face? Oh, they're probably using technology. And like, oh, what's this Zoom platform? Oh, I've used Zoom at Christmas to phone my granny and have a family quiz. There must be something in that. And so we started to look at, well, what are our clients using if they can't meet? And we found they're using Teams and Adobe Connects and WebEx and Zoom. And then I kind of adopted a principle, which is a meeting is a meeting is a meeting. There's content, there's agenda, there's a purpose, there's the know-do feel that you expect from delegates, and you probably want to reach them in advance, you probably want to reach them afterwards. And then thought, well, instead of rocking up in a location, well, it's all done electronically now. And as long as we've kind of read the manuals and we're 1 page ahead in the book, then the principle of a meeting is a meeting is a meeting, whatever the circumstances. So that's kind of what we adapted. And in the early days, we reached out to our clients and effectively said, well, what are you doing? And what do you need help with? And in the very early stages, it was people saying, well, we're having to use this platform called Zoom. And every time I put them to breakouts, they disappear and they never come back. And it's like, the video, it's rubbish on Zoom with videos, the stutter and everything else. So we quickly worked out that, you can run Zoom on steroids to a level where sometimes it's about keeping people safe. So based on what we do, at its simplest, it's a 1 hour Zoom webinar meeting run flawlessly. Now, it might be see the slides, hear the video, and you go to breakouts and we bring you back. But we've defined about 6 levels on Zoom. From Zoom on steroids, so you want it to look like, CNN or the BBC and full studio production, we do that. But what we've also been doing is kind of working on the basis that at its most complex, we might do online 4 days, 18 hours, 3 time zones, 9 languages, where we're running a whole Congress. And in the last 12 months, we did 197 events, where it was everything from 1 hour on Zoom to that one I mentioned, 4 days, 18 hours, 3 time zones, 9 languages, and I did them all. I was the continuity person for 4 days, and then I slept for a bit.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
But I think the interesting thing is that every man and his dog, or every woman and her dog, has got a virtual platform these days.
Yep.
and there's a lot of good stuff on the market. And I think we've kind of put ourselves in a position where we'll get our clients the right technology at the right price to do the right things and run it in the right way. And it's not necessarily our technology, it's the right technology. So although we have our own technologies, I kind of adopt a position which is, uh, tell me what, I'm not going to show you any tech first time we meet. Tell me what you need and tell me what you're planning to do and tell me how you're planning to run it and tell me what good would look like for you and what's your attitude to risk and what's your budget. And then I might go away and come back with a gold, silver, bronze approach. 3 platforms. One might be mine. None of them might be mine. One might be 3D, one might be 2D, one might be X, might be Y, might be Zoom on steroids. We built 50 microsites and we streamed through 50 microsites. Because that's all the client wanted. They didn't want an all singing, all dancing platform because none of them do everything that I would want them to do. Yep. So I think the learn for me has been this whole thing about how do you blend the right technologies, because clients sometimes don't always know what they want, but they've kind of got an idea of what good might look like, and then you help them range find.
Yeah, what I found was, as you know, we had again back in 2018 we had launched that global virtual aesthetic summit. Everyone thought we were nuts, but again we sort of bootstrapped it. We took a whole lot of bit of software. We weren't at the stage in having our own software by that stage, and again we didn't really know how medical professionals would go through a virtual experience and how they would be educated. But our whole aim with that, and I think with virtual, was to bring content, global experts to local communities in third world countries that we were never able to afford going to Paris or Monaco for all of these events. And I think with virtual, what I think we see the transition of events going back to in-person. Some are going hybrid, some are not. I still feel with the in-person, they are fantastic for people want to go really for the networking. They love catching up with all of the clients that, take them out for nice dinners. And it's really, you can't beat that handshake. But when it comes to content, we know that at these big conferences, we can't go to everything. And I think that's where it's really good with the hybrid or the virtual, where people can really embrace and really sort of immerse themselves in so much content, but not have to do it specifically at that event. It might be over 5 days. So what's your experience with it?
Yeah, well, I think the first one that I thought, oh, this is meaningful, was early stages of COVID. I got involved with a medical association who were briefing Mexican doctors on the COVID to come. So it was already happening in Europe, and there was the hint of stuff in Mexico, but not a lot. So one Saturday we ran a meeting for Mexican key opinion leaders, and we had doctors on from Italy, from Spain, from North America, from all the hotspots where people were literally getting COVID and dying. And we ran this event in English and Spanish, and our platform, takes all the questions and translates them from Spanish to English in real time. And that for me was we actually felt we were adding real value to Mexico. But then what you saw the value that the technology could suddenly address a problem, get a bunch of people on, get 60 Mexican specialists together on their equivalent of Saturday morning, and answer the questions. Can we wash the PPE? We've only got this drug. Would that work? What's your experience? Should we have them on their front, on their back? And you really felt that you're making a difference. And one of the reasons that I kind of set up Open Audience is this whole thing that I genuinely believe, maybe in my healthcare background, I can make lives better. It sounds very altruistic, but every time we're running a meeting in healthcare, I believe that we're incrementally improving the outcome. And whether that's clinical investigator meeting or a clinical briefing or a COVID meeting, through our intervention, the data is getting out there better, smarter, faster, and people are learning something. And the consequence is they go out and save more lives. And there's all this stuff make running the meeting well and everything else, but I have a really nice warm feeling, which is I'm saving the world. Yep. from my desk. And I think the accessibility piece is something that I think is key. In the last 12 months, we've had 149 countries represented on our meetings. I ran a meeting the other week with 90 countries on it. So we've had Bhutan, we've had Guam, we've had Nicaragua, Zimbabwe, Swaziland, which has changed its name. I had to look that one up. Plus all the usual countries. And in the drive to go back to fiscal, I know these people would not jump on a plane and go to Melbourne or go to Zurich. And to be honest, a lot of people we see are not the usual suspects that would rock up at a meeting. They're aspiring, they're up and coming, they're a specialist in a country that could never afford to jump on the plane. They might be the number 2 in a department. Who doesn't get the chance to travel because their boss goes, or they're an alliance medic or a specialist nurse, and they're coming to update their own information and own knowledge, and they wouldn't get to go to conference. And I think the kind of the it's not a rush back to in person, but I think what I'm seeing is a lot of soul searching about what does a meeting look like at the moment. So there's a lot of clinical data coming out from trials saying that, one global congress in Europe, they polled everybody and said, what would you prefer to happen? The majority said we want a virtual future if it's run properly. And the whole theory around how you learn and everything else is driving it towards virtual. But there's other companies that are saying, okay, we'll have one meeting a year, which is in person, but the rest we're going to a mix of maybe hybrids, whatever that is, and back to virtual, but we'll blend it. And I saw a really interesting comment that somebody said, don't call it hybrid, call it blended meetings. Yep. And on the basis that I think everybody thinks hybrid is you run a bunch of people live and people watch it live from outside. Well, that's one way, but I'm talking to people about different hybrid or blended options, which is give the external people a different experience, have it on a different day, have exclusive content for the viewing audience that you wouldn't get live, make it worth their while to come on at different times, regionalize the online from a global congress. So that there's a lot about, you start with the design, then the tech just follows along. But it should be the right tech that's got the right kind of delegate journey, and it should have the right bells and whistles, not just the bells and whistles that some tech guy or tech company has decided is the way to do it. Because in heavy regulated environments, there's a lot of stuff you can't do in the way that you might be able to do in a concrete conference versus a conference on oncology.
So just with regards to webinars, what we see a lot of is people come to us and say, look, we've been running our events. The latest one was, say, KPMG. They said, look, we do an employee engagement event. We do it in person, but now we actually quite like the virtual. We've been doing it on Teams, but now we want to do something that's more than just a webinar. So what's maybe 2 or 3 things that companies can really think about, or events companies can think about, maybe adding on to just another webinar? What would be some tips there?
So I think the thing for me is, how special do you want it to be? And ultimately, how much effort are you prepared to put in? Because we've run stuff on Teams, we've run stuff on Zoom. We've often used somebody else's Teams, somebody else's Zoom, our Zoom, their Teams, our Teams, whatever. But ultimately, it comes down to, we genuinely believe that we can run their tech better than they can, which is, we know which bells and whistles to push on Teams to make it more interesting. So I think there's a lot of people are thinking, oh, I can really do the Zoom stuff, but it's like, it's difference between beginner, intermediate, and advanced, and guru. And we've kind of got to the, I think the advanced or the guru stage on some of these things. So I think using the technology is one thing that immediately takes it up. We get clients where we're running an all employee meeting tomorrow, where we're actually in a conference room streaming out the CEO to 4,500 people. We've run just the normal all-employee briefing, and we just run it normally, and people are like, my goodness, that's the best meeting we've been at all year. But what they mean is, well, we actually heard the speakers because they seemed to be looking differently and we could see them. And they sounded better than they do normally. And they didn't come on with it, can you see my slides? And we see their email. And when the video played, it didn't stutter. And that was slick. That was just like it was on the TV. And so I think there's this thing which is, even doing the basics better suddenly ups it to a point where people are like, oh, that was well run. And I think that the whole thing about the Zoom fatigue, or whatever you want to call it, is people are less forgiving now than they were in the early stages. They expect the technology to be, to add value and be an enabler, not a distraction. So I think running it properly makes a real difference. And then I think there's something about the more time you can get to shape the agenda, and by getting in people's heads who are organized, it say, okay, what do you want the delegates to know, feel, and do when they leave? Right? Well, how does that work with the content? Because your content's like pretty dry. And so we've been involved with clients who were saying like, right, okay, is there anyone else can present it? Right? They may be the top person, but they're a bit boring in a nicest possible way. So what can you do about the way you shape the agenda? And don't make it suddenly go from, oh my goodness, they're all singing and dancing and playing the tambourine. What can you do within the content to maybe have a video at the beginning, or maybe have something at the end? And we've kind of taken some clients from, well, we just show the update slides. Well, why don't we make a video and put some music? And why don't we have some a smart video, an interactive video? Why don't we do something? And why don't you ask people what they want and what they think along the way, rather than just talk blindly at them? So again, that's about the content design. But we had clients during COVID who were like, right, the morale's a bit low. Is there anything you can do to help us in the meeting? And that's where you become creative. So I think in content, it's like, well, you should get them to get leadership team to do a video, a song video. And they're like, oh, right, what's one of them? It's like, oh, right, okay. Well, I actually need to do one now. So we've ended up doing 7 song videos in the last year. Leadership team, 200 people taking part, miming, singing, cutting it together and everything. And then you can be really creative. I'm sure carpool karaoke is not, I don't claim that we thought about it, but one of the clients, it's like, do carpool karaoke with your leadership team at the end of the year as a bit of a giggle for your team. And they're like, oh, right, how to do that? I say, I'll find your James Corden lookalike, which we did. And then they rocked up in a Range Rover, and the CEO was singing in the Range Rover. And so you can do things like that that's really quite interesting and cool. But I think the other thing is, take them to something they don't normally expect and run it well. So coming back to platforms, if they're always on Teams, surprise them if you can by going on Zoom, or run something on Vimeo, or get them on a virtual platform that doesn't fall over. And take them to something that is as simple to follow, easy to operate for people like me that are okay tech, but I'm not hugely techie. And if I can work it, the average Joe or Bob can work it. But don't make the platform so crazy that everybody spends their life laughing at the platform. I was on a platform where it was a desert island with palm trees and coconuts and lava, and I was a speaker. And I spent about 20 minutes on this volcanic island. I found campfires, I found coconuts. I could not find the agenda, and I could not find where I was meant to log on. And I spent 20 minutes going up and down this blooming volcano, and that was like form over function. It's like, yeah, that I'll never do that one. It's really interesting, and I remember it. But for me, it's kind of like I don't even know where the agenda is on this island. So I think there's something that you have to take the average audience to think about. What's the unexpected and what you could do, and then, as I say, just run it blooming well.
Yeah, no, that's great. Is there? Look, you've got. I mean, just some of those things that you've mentioned. I think there's some great nuggets for people to sort of take take back and sort of integrate into their events companies. I think, what would you say, just finishing off, what would be one of the biggest learnings over the last couple of years that you've had to take in and integrate into your business? And what do you see the future being?
Well,
Probably another question there.
I think it's like Monty Python. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. Always expect the unexpected. We were chatting just before we come on. The first time I said, "Oh, right, well, let's assume that the chair here has a problem with their internet. Who's going on in their place if it happens?" I thought, well, that's quite a good thing to say. I read it in a book somewhere. And I'd no longer said it, and I was like counting down 30 to 0, and the chair's machine went off. Right, it's just disappeared. And I was like, it was flawless. It was like, Stephen, can you take over, please? Right, okay. I'm sure she'll be back on. Can you just keep going? So I think that the learn is about some of these things, and I think the other learn is, it's easy to talk about stuff that people don't get. And everybody, if you say, "Oh, I'll run you Zoom level 3 and we'll make it look like the BBC," it's like, I know what that means. And they're like, what the hell is he on about?
Mm.
So we've got a lot of examples to range find, which says, I can run Zoom in any one of these formats. Let me show you what it looks like. Like, oh, is that what it is? Well, how do you do that? Don't worry about how we do it. We do it. So I think most of the people that I'm working with know that they need tech, but they're not quite sure what to do with it. And I think there's a great danger if you're very experienced this area, is you forget and you leave people behind, because you're like, I know it's a level 3, and they're like, oh, I don't even know what level 1 or 2 is like. So I think there's something about always explain and insist on things like, we need your chair on for a rehearsal. They should not rock up 5 minutes before. I'm not, that is not good practice. The number of times they've said, oh, they're really experienced, they know what they're like. And then you're like a minute off, and the chair's like, I can't get through a firewall in my institution, and I can't download Zoom, and it's asking me to update, and and it's a disaster. So I think the whole good practice around, here are the things that we know will keep you safe and de-risk the meeting. This is what you need to get your faculty and speakers and your group to do, because we know from experience, if you don't do the following things and insist on a rehearsal, that's when it looks less than professional. And we take that badly, and we take it very personally, even though we've warned about it, because we know that get people on in advance, get them confident, explain what's going to happen, check, are you where you're going to make the call, check your internet, what happens if it goes wrong, let's get that down. So all you need to do is worry about coming out on the day, switching on half an hour before, go and have a cup of coffee, and we know you're good to go. So I think that's one of the things. It's just like, people will say, well, we're on Zoom all the time. Well, but you're not on our Zooms. And we have a standard that we know works well and keeps you safe. Yeah. And that's our professionalism. And we can share that with you.
Great. No, that's great, Leslie. I think I really, really appreciate you coming on and having this interview. I think, I would love to have you on as a guest, and I know you've got a lot of guests actually you'd like to bring on to the podcast, yeah, and you as well. And I think it'd be really fun actually, because we've got similarities, and you've got some really interesting people I know that I would love to hear on this podcast, and I'm sure everyone else would as well. So I'd like to say good luck for 2022, and again, look forward to our next podcast interview.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for having me.